Sole is a spiritual channel, a teacher, a mentor. She is an accredited energy healer with the School of Intuition and Healing. She's also an Usui Reiki master, a certified crystal healer. And as a natural psychic, she began working intuitively very early on in life and has been reading tarot for over 2 decades. Her practical approach is all about translating ancient wisdom into modern spirituality, making it accessible to everyone interested in developing their abilities. With a background in marketing and business strategy, Soleil also helps budding spiritual entrepreneurs to bring their soul-aligned business to the world. And Soleil's practice is called the Spiritual Flamingo, and she has a diverse international clientele of individuals and corporate clients. Soleil, a very warm welcome to our platform this evening.
Thank you. Hi, Mark. Hello, everyone. I'm so excited to be here with you all. And I can see in the chat so many people. I can recognize some of the names, some people that I know already, plenty of new people from all over the place. So excited to be here.
Great. So to start with, and you know, maybe if you can just provide a simple explanation, what is tarot?
Good question, right? We need to start with the basics. So on the most basic level, tarot is a deck of 78 cards. And specifically, I'm sure people are very familiar with oracle decks, angel cards. Those are quite popular at the moment. But specifically with tarot, it has a unique structure. It's always 78 cards, and they are divided in what is called the major arcana and minor arcana. So the major arcana in the set, in this structure, they are organized to really cover important issues, big archetypes in our lives, big energies. And then the minor arcana cover more kind of day-to-day things, smaller issues, smaller changes in energy. And what's unique about tarot is that it doesn't matter what type of deck you get, what style, who is the creator, you will always get that 78 cards structure. That's kind of the biggest difference with other tarot decks, with other card decks like Angel and Oracle. And I guess the other different thing is the history, which is a bit strange and mysterious, really.
Which sounds very interesting. But before we get into the history of the tarot cards, can you just explain oracle cards and tarot cards in general? Like,
Yes.
how does it actually work? Like what do you use them for?
So I guess the most traditional and well-known use of this type of cards is divination, predicting the future, answering the question, am I going to meet the dark and handsome man? That sort of thing. I believe very, very strongly that actually tarot decks and, oracle cards and angel cards are fantastic as well. I'm just going to talk about tarot because that's the topic that we have tonight. They are such a great way of taking time to reflect on the energies that are present in our life at the moment. The images, the different layers of meanings. You have numerology, you have astrology, you have Kabbalah, you have religious symbolism in that. There is just so much for us to work with and for us to get such a deeper connection with ourselves, with our energy, with our spiritual practice. So for me, of course, there is a divination and prediction side to it. But what I feel is more modern is really the empowering side of tarot. And this is what I'm really passionate about. And this is why I think it's very modern as a tool, although it's a few centuries old. And I guess, the main thing with tarot is once you learn the system, then you can use any tarot deck. Where with oracle cards or angel cards, obviously those are based on the creativity and the inspiration of the different authors of the decks. So every time that you start working with a different deck, you kind of need to learn a new system. So tarot is something that, you start using, and then it's kind of a lifelong journey that you can have with that system.
Yeah. And so it's a tool for accessing your intuition and perhaps
Yes,
accessing
I
your
think
ghost
one of the
intelligence.
legends and myths around it is that you need to be psychic or you need to be intuitive. I think what you need to be is willing to reflect on something, because it can have a very meditative element to it as well. So if you're intuitive, if you're psychic, it's a wonderful tool to access higher guidance, your higher self, your guides, ascendant masters, whatever you're working with. If you're not, it's a tool that is so packed with information that really works with your subconscious. It works with your imagination. It works with your creativity. So it's something that truly I believe anyone can use. And I don't want people to feel like, oh, but I'm not psychic. I don't come from a long line of, 25 generations of intuitives. No, it truly is for everyone. And I think what really is across the board, what people say to me of their experience is, it's a tool that helps them really reconnect with themselves and ground themselves in their energy. And I think that's one of the most valuable aspects of the tool. But yes, of course, there is the psychic and intuitive side to it as well. Yes, for sure, for sure.
So you mentioned something interesting. You said, some people come from a long line of psychics in their family, but how long has the tarot actually been around? Where does it come from?
So this is the slightly controversial and secretive history of the tarot. So if any of you are familiar with Spanish, Portuguese, Italian playing cards, you will see that there are some similarities with the minor arcana in the tarot. And this is because around the 15th century, more or less, in Italy, the tarot developed kind of from the starting point of a game, of a card game. So originally, it really wasn't for divination in any shape and form. There was an element of kind of moral teaching, Christian teaching into this game of cards. But by no means, it really wasn't about predicting the future. It's only later on, 16th, 17th century in France, when it becomes more of a tool to predict the future. And it's tarot got kind of reinvented at that point, refreshed as a divination tool. And then the tarot cards that we use very frequently nowadays is something, and it's something that I'll show you later because I'm going to use them tonight as well, is something called Rider-Waite-Smith. And it's a deck that is a little bit closer to us in time. And definitely this has been created with the intent of really being connecting with spiritual practices, with divination, and so on. So you can see that it went from a game to then predicting the future to a spirituality, introspection type of tool. And I feel like today it can really be used for anything from predicting the future to helping you maybe with your creative writing. It's that broad, really.
Yeah.
But certainly because of the history being so mysterious, and there are a lot of urban legends around it, like it's evil to even touch tarot, and lots of things that over the course of time have been kind of layering on top of the actual facts, and just became a bit of a legend around tarot.
And I suppose that adds all the more to the allure of it.
I guess so, yes.
Yeah. But I suppose I can see how that, has developed, because as far as divination tools go, I mean, in South Africa, our traditional healers read bones. And in some places they read the tea leaves, and in other places they'll read something else. And I suppose it's not surprising that a deck of cards developed in that way.
Yes, and there is still with the different, so the minor arcana, very much like playing cards, it's structured in 4 suits, and each of the 4 suits is connected with the 4 elements. So there is really a connection even from the starting point, even when it was a game, there is that connection with something that goes beyond just playing, just being a piece of paper with some images. And I think this is, for me, tarot is like, maybe you will laugh about this, but for me, tarot is a little bit like Shakespeare. It's something that is such a classic that obviously the details and the of a certain story, of a certain play, maybe are a little bit outdated because the social setting is different, but the energy of it, the human interaction, the archetypes are still so modern. And it's the same with tarot. There is stuff that you think, this is so old, this is so outdated, sure. But if you just take that layer off and you focus on the core of it, it's just so timeless, such a classic. And I think it goes back to that connection with the elements, with astronomy, with numerology, etc., etc. So yeah, it's just, and it's interesting that you mentioned like different divination tools, because it can also be used in conjunction with other divination tools or with other spiritual tools, like crystals, like rooms, like all sorts of different tools. Yes,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah. So how did you first come across the tarot then?
So I was born psychic, and I didn't have a really great time when I was a child. Basically, I didn't know what was happening to me, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this. If we have lots of people in the audience that maybe are very intuitive or naturally quite open to picking up other people's energy, it's very difficult to learn how to manage it at the beginning. So for me, I had a very hard time when I was a child figuring out how to work with it. And then I discovered that in my home, no one was reading tarot, bizarrely enough, but there was this very old deck of cards that was gifted to my grandmother by someone who was an old aunt. Just one of those really random and weird stories that you see in movies, but it's actually true. So my first tarot deck is a tarot deck that dates back to the 1920s, more or less. And so bear in mind, I'm going to give away my age now. I grew up, in the 80s and 90s in Sicily, in Italy. So this is before the internet, before Amazon. We obviously had bookshops, we had libraries, but definitely we didn't have anything that was like holistic type of bookshops or anything like that. So when I started, I really found this tool and I thought, this is interesting. And for me, what was a game change was the fact that I could open and close, open and close, open and close, because I connected my spiritual work, my energetic work with a tool that I could control. So for the first time for me, rather than always having issues on not knowing how to work with my energy, I started working with a tool. And then, I was young, I started doing readings, I started doing some research, and I figured, you know what, this is incredible. This is just incredible. And I made my own tarot deck, and I just developed from that. And then, thousands of readings later, several books later, several courses later, here I am still believing that it's like one of the best things in the world ever. So it was a bit of a strange way of approaching it, I guess.
So how old were you when you first started using that old tarot deck?
So the first time that it came in my hands, I was probably around 10. maybe a little bit younger, I remember where it was stored in my house. And I remember my mom saying, "Yeah, you're too young, just leave it for now." But I remember being so attracted to this magical tool, and then starting working with it. And then really, I would say within the age of 10 and 15 is when I really started working with it properly, and learning about it. And I'm sure giving really terrible readings when I first started.
But that's quite interesting though, because you grew up in Sicily,
Yeah,
which I presume is a very Catholic part of the world,
it is.
and,
Yes.
and and yet your mother was quite open to you using this
Yeah,
old. Oh,
I've been very fortunate that although maybe my parents were not very experienced as far as intuitive and psychic work is concerned, they've always been very open. So I always had the freedom of exploring things. So I guess I was lucky in that
yeah.
sense.
Was there
Yeah.
any resistance to you doing that in your community?
Um, Not really, because I think the way is perceived is like it's a bit of a game. Is, people imagine, I mean, I guess I'm wearing hoop earrings tonight, but people imagine you someone with a turban and the kind of stereotypical way of presenting yourself, and the crystal ball. So the type of feedback that I got growing up and with my first readings was either, "Oh yes, I would like to do this for fun," or "No, I'm not interested." But I have to say, I was fortunate that I never got any particularly negative feedback of any type. No, I have to say, yeah.
So when you started using your first deck, you had nobody to show you the ropes and teach you anything. How did you go about learning what everything meant?
So I started, most tarot decks come with this little book that is called the Little White Book, which has very, very basic, very archaic meanings. And that was my starting point. And then practice, loads of practice. And this is what I teach to this very day, is one of those things. Tarot is like an instrument or like a language. You can study on paper the notes, you can study on paper the grammar of a language, but if you don't practice, if you don't play the violin, you're not going to learn. If you don't speak Spanish, you're not going to learn. So I just practiced, and I started making notes of things that would come up. So when this card comes up, it's connected with this energy, and this type of person tends to get this type of card, and this type of question tends to get this type. So it was very much based on experiencing things, I guess, a very empirical approach to it. And after I've done all of that, then I went into the books, which in some cases validated some of my findings. In some others, I was like, "Oh, I got that really wrong, didn't I?" And this is, again, until today, something that I really believe in, to just jump in and use it for yourself, for friends. It doesn't matter if you need a book. It doesn't matter if your readings are not perfect, but just jump in, work with the tool, and use, especially if you use a Rider-Waite Smith, where all the cards have beautiful images. Just let the images basically carry you through the reading and inspire you, and give you that sense of creativity as you go through the reading, and you share what you're picking up on.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a conversation, right? It's that you're talking with someone and you're using the cards almost like as a conversation starter.
Yeah. Okay. So how do you use these cards with your clients, and like what sort of impact has a tarot reading had with your clients?
I probably done, this is no exaggeration, I've done thousands of readings. And I read for young people, old people, people from all sorts of different backgrounds, religious, not religious, different sexualities, different genders, different professions, you name it. And the most common comment that I get is, wow, I didn't think this is how a tarot reading would go. And you know what? I knew this, but I wasn't ready to focus my attention on it. So for me, obviously, every single tarot reader will have a slightly different approach and a slightly different technique. But for me, the biggest and most valuable feedback that I get is when people say, you know what? It clarified so much for me. So more than saying, I know what I'm going to do next because you predicted my future, which to me feels like a jail sentence. You know, if someone predicts your future, what's the value of that? Because if I give you the answer that you want, you're always going to think, I hope it's right, you know? And if I don't give you the answer that you want, then either you feel depressed and down and constricted by the answer that I gave you, or you just feel like, oh, I wasted my money, I wasted my time. So back to your question, I think clarity to really understand, right, this is what happened. This is what's happening now. This is my biggest block. And empowering them to see options. This is, I think, the most powerful way of using tarot. Clarity, awareness, and opening up possibilities. You know, I'm 39, almost 40. I think anyone who had any sort of shorter or longer life experience, we know that life can be challenging. So it is only normal that across thousands of readings, some of them are very hard, you know, and some people are in position where actually you think, wow, that must be difficult for you. The key is not whitewashing or lightwashing everything and making it just unicorns and rainbows. No, the key is to give people that sense of awareness and clarity so that, you know what, it's difficult, but I know what my next little step can possibly be. And this is, for me, is the transformative and magical and empowering power of tarot. Definitely.
Yeah, I remember some years ago, the first time I ever had a card reading done. And I suppose I was in a bit of a difficult situation at the time, and somebody did a tarot reading for me. And I was just so amazed that, you know, they shuffled the cards and laid them out. And as they explained them, I was just like, how did the cards get into that position that they landed up explaining my situation that I was in so clearly? I was like, how does it happen?
Yeah. And
Just from shuffling the cards.
not only that, and this is like mind-blowing to me, cards have so many meanings. So it's not just 78 cards, it's 78 cards times infinite meanings, more or less. Yeah. So when you read for someone, it's not only that you're picking the right cards or the most relevant cards, you're also picking the aspect of that card that is relevant for that person. And for me, you would think after so many years that I should know the cards by now, right? And sometimes I pick a card like, oh, I never seen this little detail, or I've never really taken into consideration this aspect. And there are so many things that are now a modern version of something that 10 years ago didn't exist. You know, let me give you an example. In the major arcana, there is a card that is called the Word. Okay. Let me try and see if I can find it. It typically is the last one in the deck when you're looking for it. So there are lots of traditional meanings with this, which is about completion and travel and international travel, of course, and so on and so forth. But as of, you know, a couple of decades or 3 decades until now, obviously, this is the card I'm referring to. Obviously, internet, social media is very much part of our day-to-day life. So over the course of the last decade, this card is becoming more and more, oh, is this a social media connection that you're going to make with someone? Is there like an online dating aspect to this question that you're asking me? So as I said before, with the example and analogy of Shakespeare, they are outdated in some cases, but they kind of renew themselves. It's like a living thing that is evolving with us, with our energy and with our times. And that's mind-blowing to me. And this is why I'm still so passionate about it. And I get bored of everything, but never get bored of tarot.
Yeah, so just so the audience knows, in a few minutes, when we get towards the end of this presentation, you're going to have an opportunity to post your questions into the chat box, and Sola is going to do a reading on one of those questions, and perhaps even another one later on if we've got time. So just start thinking about the question that you might have. But Sola, what sort of questions do people come to you with, and what is the impact? Like, how does it impact on a person's life?
So the type of questions I feel anyone who has a psychic or intuitive side to what they do and how they contribute in the world, I feel it comes with a huge responsibility, because people come to you it's rare that someone comes to you and says, oh, I'm just going to have a reading for fun. I think nowadays most people come when they're stuck, when they have a big issue, when in some cases when they're desperate. So they come to you and they ask you a really broad range of questions. And a very typical one, especially I guess nowadays, that we're getting is, will I get the job? Right? Because a lot of people are perhaps struggling financially, or they're looking to change their job or whatever. And for me, the first thing that I do is having that initial conversation with the client and say, do you mind if we change the question? Because will I get the job is a yes and no answer that completely takes power away from you. So how about we turn this into, what can I do to progress in my career for my highest good? How can I best present myself to a potential employer? All those open, empowering questions that give them an opportunity to actually take control of their energy. So I had all sorts of questions. I had questions, obviously relationship questions are still very, very popular, but I guess now that people know how I work and I make it very clear what I focus on, I get a lot of questions about spiritual development, purpose, how do I contribute to the bigger picture? So I'm seeing more and more that people are moving away from the here and now and into the bigger picture of self-development, self-love, overcoming trauma. So maybe people that are doing their own healing journey, maybe with traditional therapy, maybe, all sorts of different super valuable and important tools. And then they add maybe a tarot reading or a tarot practice to get that additional dimension to the work that they are doing. So it can be very varied. Personally, there are certain subjects that I don't read on. I don't read about anything that is like health related, because I'm not a medical doctor, and I don't read for people that are not in the room, because I don't think that's ethical. I wouldn't want anyone to read about me without my consent, so I don't do it. So if it's a relationship reading, I always bring the focus on the person that is in front of me, rather than, oh, is it going to come back to me? Or what is it thinking? What is it doing? Or what is she doing? Right? So but it really varies. What I would say, the people that get the most out of it are the people that really come ready to be challenged by the tarot, because it can be quite straight to the point and sometimes a bit brutal in the type of answers, but it's really it's not what you want to hear, but it's what you need to hear. So huge range of questions. Yeah. Oh, I think you're still on mute. Yeah.
So should we perhaps invite the audience to perhaps type their questions
Yes.
into the chat box? So not the Q&A. If you
Yeah.
can post your question for
Yeah.
Sarah into the chat box, taking into consideration those
Yeah.
comments that you made about the type of questions that are good to ask and so on. And Sola is going to choose one of these questions that comes up and do a demonstration for us.
Yes. I've also seen, Mark, we have some amazing questions in the Q&A tab. So if time permitting, I would love to answer a couple of those if we can.
Yeah, we'll definitely go to the Q&A once we've finished getting through our presentation and talking about, what happens next. But let's go through.
I love this question. This question was sent just to us, but I hope it's okay to just please understand that if you're posting a question, obviously you're giving me your consent to read for you, and you're giving us you're opening a window on your energy so that we can share a bit of information about this. So this was sent just to us, so I hope you it's okay to read it. This person says, how can I best serve the universe at present? This is my dream question. I feel like this is wonderful question. So definitely I love to start with that one. So what you do is you shuffle, and readings, answering another question that I've seen, they can be in person, they can be via Zoom, you can, different people have different modalities, but it's almost like when you're tuning into the radio, you don't need to be in the same room, you're tuning into a frequency. So for this person, okay. This person is asking, how can I best serve the universe at present? So what we're looking for is the general guidance, the specifics for this person, and actionable steps. Now, the card that we're getting is the Wheel of Fortune. The Wheel of Fortune is a major. This means that it's a card that looks at big picture things, that typically is connected with big life changes, big chapters that are beginnings. So we're looking at a big macro energy rather than something that is day to day. So for this one, the first thing that I would say to this person is, clearly, not only this question is lovely, and I love this question so much, but this person has been thinking about this for some time, and she's ready to step into the next chapter. The Wheel of Fortune has the energy of change that happens naturally. Think about the seasons, think about getting gray hair, those kind of natural changes that happen in life. And with the Wheel of Fortune, if we are so keen to get involved into a new chapter, it can be frustrating because we are ready. We feel like we shed some layers, we want to contribute, we are ready to go, but it hasn't happened yet. And it can be a little bit frustrating to wait because not all levels of our energy are ready to jump in. And this card is then confirmed by the Moon. Again, she gets another major, which really makes me think this person, the Moon, she must have done a lot of self-development, healing, work with a deep subconscious levels of her energy. And she is at a point where she's coming out of that and she's asking herself, how do I contribute? And to me, there is then the Eight of Pentacles. So you can see we have like a lovely 2 majors, 1 minor. That kind of gives us, these two would give us, here is the broader picture, here's the headline. And then this, the Eight of Pentacles goes into the practicalities of it. The Eight of Pentacles, this is really leading this person in the direction of, when you start talking about making a difference, is your ego talking, right? I want to make a difference. Where actually the mindset to have in this case is, how can I contribute? And rather than waiting for the big thing to happen and maybe getting frustrating that is not happening yet, the guidance is, the way you do this is with small incremental actions. So whether it is on a day-to-day, helping someone, saying something kind to someone, etc. Now, in a normal reading setting, I would go into more details and talking with this person about potential ways that they are talking, that they are working already from maybe a spiritual perspective, and go into more details. But really what you want to provide with people with is a sense that there is something coming up for them that they can take control of. So for this person, once again, it's a lovely question to ask. And I feel, if you've been feeling that all the work that you've been doing hasn't materialized yet, please be patient. It's just the energy of the Wheel of Fortune. It needs a little bit more for you to transition out of this cocoon type of energy, so that you can then jump into a more active way of working with others. With the Suit of Pentacles, is always something that requires work, that requires dedication, and that requires repeating things until when they grow. It's not an overnight solution that you find. So the one thing that you're asked is, think small, think day to day, and think repetitive actions that can help and support others versus the big change. I'm going to leave it like that, because I don't want to go into like too personal details. I'm trying to give it like the right balance between giving information and not giving too much away.
Yeah, and I see we got a thumbs up from the questioner there. So I think
Yes.
you have provided some good answers. So before we move on, just one last question from me. If somebody wanted to start working with their deck of tarot cards, is there like a simple exercise that they could start with?
Yes. So there are three main ways. I'll just quickly go through them. You can use it for meditation. What you do is simply, you get any deck. I always recommend Rider-Waite-Smith for beginners, because you find loads of information and explanation about the meanings online. So it's an easy way to begin. Shuffle the deck. You go into, whatever your meditation practice is, whatever you sit down, maybe you have a nice area in your home. You pick one card and you just use the card to focus your mind. I know that a lot of us do visualizations and journeys and all of that, but not everyone is very good at visualizing things, and it can get quite frustrating. So it's a beautiful way to just visualize something and focus your mind on something. And from that, if really focusing your mind is not your thing, you can even use the card as a starting point for journaling. And you can ask yourself, what are the main elements that are standing out to me? What overall energy I'm getting from this card? How does it apply to me? If this card could talk to me, what advice would give me? So you can go into that journaling practice, and to do this is something that anyone, even without any knowledge of tarot, can do. So that's one thing. If you have a little bit of knowledge of tarot, you can start using cards to really bring in the energy that you want to manifest. So you can go through the tarot deck and pick the cards that you know what, I love the look of this Ace of Cups. I want that abundance, that love, that sense of having my cup always full. I want that in my life. So I'm going to set this on my desk, on my nightstand, so that I can always see it and focus my energy and my intention that way. And the final way, if you are even more into the concept of really learning tarot, I would suggest pick one card, but pick it at the end of the day. not at the beginning. Because at the beginning of the day, imagine you get one of the scary ones, which by the way, the scary ones are not so scary, but imagine you get the devil or the tarot at the beginning of the day and it's a Monday, that's going to be a bad day for you. So instead of doing it at the beginning of the day, do it at the end of the day, so that you can tell, okay, I'm still alive, things are okay. So, no big disaster has happened during the day, right? And you can really go back to that and say, right, what elements of my day are represented in this card? So that you start connecting the energy of the card with real life situations. So that when you start doing maybe some divination and predictive type of work, you have that reference. When you start reading for others, you have that reference. This is one of the things that I would do when I first started. Pick a card at the end of the day and see how you can connect it with how your day has been. The highlights, the lowlights, everything in between.
Okay, so that's some great advice for people starting out. And we're going to just, in a moment, I want to show people how they can take some next steps with you. But we've got so many questions. I think if I just read maybe a few questions from the Q&A, then we'll take a look at the next steps, and then we'll go back to the Q&A and possibly even do another reading for somebody.
Yes.
So the first question coming up here is, do you still use your original old set from the 1920s?
Here it is.
The answer is yes.
I don't use it anymore. I treasure it as something very, very special. And I still have it and I love it. I don't use it anymore. It's beautiful, beautiful quality, but it's just so special to me that I just keep it as a little treasure, but I still have it.
Great. There's a question from somebody else. Does the client need to be physically present, or can you do a reading over Zoom? And I think you've just answered that.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Very much like if you're familiar with energy healing and remote healing, it's kind of the same concept. You're connecting with the energy of the person. You don't need to be in the same room.
Yeah. Okay. So here's an interesting question. I've noticed how many psychics are not able to read for themselves or their families. Is this the same with the tarot? Are you able to use the tarot as a tool that would bring clarity to yourself?
I love this question because I think you hit the nail on the head. It is possible to read for yourself, and I highly encourage it, but it's one of the most difficult things. People ask me, how can you read for this person? You never met it. That's the easy one, because in so many ways, you don't have any preconceptions on that person. You never met them before, especially if it's maybe a reading done via email. You don't even know what they look like, how old they are. You don't know anything. So that's easy. You have a completely blank slate. When you're reading for yourself or your family members, your loved ones, friends, and so on, you are attached to an outcome, right? You really hope that they get the job. You really hope that they get the outcome that they want. So it is difficult. But what I always say is, if you go out in the world and you give sometimes some pretty tough love to people with some pretty, straightforward guidance that come to the tarot to other people, then you need to be able to do it to yourself as well. You need to have the honesty and clarity and awareness and transparency to do this on yourself. And it is difficult, but I think it's 100% important to learn to do that. And sometimes a way of going around this is doing your reading, taking a photo, taking some notes, and just leave it there. And then revisit it in 1 month, 3 months, and just say, haha, actually, now that I know what I know, I can see what was happening there. Yeah. A very good question. Thank you.
Okay. There's an interesting question from Patsy. Hi, Sole. How do you respond to questions on timing in situations? Can tarot be used to gauge timing on events?
Yes. So there are loads of different techniques, and different readers will use different approaches. Yes, you can definitely do that. What I typically do is before starting the reading, I set the intention that I'm reading for the next 3 to 6 months window, because I feel is enough time to get to see some change and to give guidance with enough with an horizon that really gives you enough room for you to see change and for you to take charge of that change. There are different techniques. There are people that, for example, if there are major cards, they would say that's the length of 1/4. And then if it's a minor card, that would be 1 month. So different people would use different techniques connected with timing, but definitely something that can be done. Obviously, tarot is a spiritual tool, it's not a clock. So you can be precise to a certain extent. Yes, but yes, you can. Lots of techniques to do that.
Let's do one more question before moving on.
Mhm.
Can one be a competent tarot reader if one is not naturally intuitive or psychic?
Thank you so much for asking this question. Yes, you can. You absolutely can. One of my closest friends, who is a fantastic tarot reader, absolutely isn't psychic, isn't intuitive, is just someone who really knows the system very well, understands the energy, and uses his imagination, his creativity to get that creative storytelling flow, that reading going by looking at the cards. You do not need to be psychic, you do not need to be intuitive, and you can use tarot cards for all sorts of things, like creative writing. If you want to, you can use it energetically to look into people's energy. So absolutely, you do not need to be psychic or intuitive, and you will get amazing results, and in some cases even better results of people who are intuitive and psychic. 100%.
Before we wrap things up, there are a couple more good questions in the Q&A. And then I'm going to let you choose one more question for a reading. Okay.
Yeah.
There's a question from Elmin. How do you shuffle your deck? How do reverse cards start in a deck? And this sounds like something for the more advanced listeners.
So shuffling your deck, this is one of the areas where there are a lot of urban legends. My take on this is you need to do what works for your spiritual practice. For me, I shuffle just as you would shuffle a normal deck of cards. It very much depends. It boils down to the size of your hand and the size of your deck. If you're using a particularly big deck and you have small hands, you might need to use a table and just shuffle that way. There are very interesting ways of shuffling where, for example, you use numerology. So if you are connecting with a certain energy, if you want to connect with a certain question, you can use numerology and shuffle a certain number of times to set the intention for that specific energy. Some people read reversed cards, some others don't. I personally don't, because I use my intuition to feel whether the energy is blocked or not. Again, it's personal preference. Traditionally, reversed cards tend to symbolize blocked energies. More modern interpretations go towards reverse cards symbolizing perhaps something that is subconscious, something that isn't visible yet, something that isn't fully complete and available. So they're very good questions. They require a long answer, but basically what I always recommend is this is your tool. This is the instrument that you play. Find your way of working with it, not what other people are saying. Find your way that works for you, for your guides, if you work with your guides, and stick with that methodology that makes you feel comfortable and confident, and that's how you're going to get the best readings.
Great, thank you. So Sole, we don't have too much time left, but there are so many more good questions for a reading in the Q&A tab that we didn't look at the first time around. Perhaps if you open up the Q&A tab and just scan through those questions then, see if there's perhaps something that you feel drawn to do a reading on.
There is a great one. What is the best approach to take to start a mental health platform? So I'm assuming this is someone who is thinking about setting up either a business or a platform where they can help and support other people who have maybe mental health issues, and they're asking how they can go about it, if there is any guidance there. So I love that question. By the way, there are a ton of fantastic questions. I'm very, very sorry we can't cover all of them. So if we don't get to yours, it's not because you asked a bad question. It's just we don't have time. Okay, so what is the best approach to take to start a mental health platform? All right. I'm going to go into this very quickly. The Chariot, again, a major. The Chariot in modern interpretation, because there is that energy of winning the balance of the white and the black horse. I would say this platform would be fantastic if launched with loads of case studies of people talking about how they found their own balance and how they managed to find their own approach to addressing their mental health issues. So maybe case studies or like real people talking about their own experience. And then with the Chariot, there is always an element of being mobile. So yes, it could be something mobile as in it moves, but again, taking it to 2021 interpretations, I would say consider whether it might be something that can be best expressed on a mobile, as in a mobile phone or a tablet. This has to be the shortest reading that I ever done in my life. But I hope this helps you, giving a couple of ideas with the case studies and the personal stories. And I don't want to say success stories, but personal stories of how people have addressed their mental health issues. I think that would be very powerful, and something that has a mobile element. So an app or something that can be easily accessed by people on the go.
Great. Thank you so much, Sola. That was really a wonderful presentation. I'm really sorry we don't have more time to answer all the questions that have come through. There are just so many. If we don't draw a line somewhere, we'd never get through them all. But I think you've got enough information to actually take this further if you want. And I just want to say thank you, Sola, very much for sharing your time and your wisdom with us this evening.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Mark, for having me. And thank you, everyone, for coming and chatting with us. And yes, I mean, if you guys have any questions, just get in touch with us. I'm sure we'll be happy to provide more info.